Yes.
There we go. All right. Thank you all very much for having me. It is my pleasure and an honor to answer the call to teach you all this evening. I love growing food. Like food, yes. Other things, some of them, yes, if I must. Um, so let's talk about practical and sustainable homesteading. What are the methods? How do we work with nature and not against it? I just presented this to Vero Beach Rare Fruit Council a few weeks ago because we have a lot of people who are engaging in trying to live a more sustainable life. All right, so today when I was talking with Angela, we were talking about the ways that the word homesteading and the words homes and sustainable have been used in different times, right? So, homesteading is the act or practice of acquiring, settling on, or occupying land under a homestead law. Now, that was when it was when the homestead law was enacted in the 1800s, right? So you were required to stay there for 5 years. You were required to do some level of cultivation, and you had to have a constructed dwelling place. Those were the rules in place in order for you to go ahead and submit your paperwork and say, this big tract of land is now mine. All right. The goal at that time was to populate and develop the American frontier with independent land-owning farmers. And of course, it even to this day, it's a very romanticized idea of what was really a very hard, it was a very grueling situation to be existing in, and yet people persisted, right? So homesteading as a legal practice waned off because of mechanized agriculture and urbanization. And so the Homestead Act was repealed in 1976 for most of the contiguous United States, and then in 1986 for Alaska. Um, Now, homesteading is understood to be a voluntary, sustainable lifestyle focused on self-reliance, which was a major thing previously, ecological stewardship, and reduced dependence on industrial systems. So we, I had a few people who were trying to figure out a way to come off of the municipal electrical grid while still being in the city. And so they're looking at solar power, they're looking at other ways to generate electricity because they still want to use electricity, right? Um, and modern homesteaders include rural and urban residents alike. And sustainability is very simple. It's environmentally responsible. You're using your natural resources in a way that maintains ecological balance and minimizes harm to soil, water, air, and biodiversity. And the main reason for that is especially because this is the environment that you're trying to exist in the majority of your time. And so you don't want to deplete those resources, right? It's economically viable. It supports your long-term productivity and self-reliance without relying heavily on outside inputs or creating an unmanageable debt. I want you all to really think about that when it comes to any of your gardening efforts, any of your landscaping and personal food growing efforts. It must be economically viable. What are the things that seem to be your white elephants in your gardening dream plan, right? Um, and let's how do we turn them into something that is more sustainable for you? I shy away from telling anyone no because no is unnecessary. I will, however, say yes. Here's how. Because sometimes it's not the idea that is poor. It's the execution because you do not have as much information as I have about how to manage your grand scheme. And I'm here for the grand schemes. All right. It's also socially and culturally resilient. We know the saying that is no man is an island. When you're homesteading, honestly, you should not seek to isolate yourself. Isolation is never the the goal of urban homesteading. The goal of urban homesteading is truly to build strong adaptable communities, preserving skills, traditions, and practices that can and have endured over time in response to the changing of your conditions, right? That is what socially and culturally resilience means. So here is the purpose of this class and why sustainability matters for self-sufficiency and reliant and resilience. True sustainability means lower costs and fewer dependencies on external systems. A few months ago, we had a good breeze. We had a little side swipe from a hurricane, and there were whole sections of Indian River County that did not have electricity for a good while. Those people had to find alternative sources to have food preservation, to be able to cook, to be able to clean, to be able to bathe, to do their basics in life, right? Um, and so if you already have a homesteading situation in place, then your dependencies on these external systems to provide you with those services can be reduced, and your ability to be flexible in those conditions will be increased. That is the goal, right? A thriving homestead works with nature's cycles, not against them. This is especially important for the people who have recently transplanted from more northerly climates, where you have them looking at us when we're not growing slicing tomatoes varieties in the middle of summer. Because that's just not going to really work well here in Florida. You can grow some cherry tomatoes, you can grow some grape tomatoes, but super big slicing tomatoes where one slice covers up the whole piece of bread, not necessarily going to be your best effort here in Florida. So, how do we work with nature's cycles, especially as it pertains to Florida and our unique climate with the heat, the humidity, the salt air? How do we work with that and not against it? And then I want to talk about some very small practical steps that can lead to bigger changes over time. I try to encourage people to never say to themselves that they're going to revamp all of their gardening activities, their entire landscape in one shot. Try to do small pieces, get them under management, and then move on to the next thing. I think it is more rewarding. I think it helps you psychologically, physically, financially to do things in small bites. You don't eat an elephant in one sitting, right? It's the same thing with your sustainable plan. It's great if you say to yourself, I'm enthusiastic about everything that Nikki's going to teach this evening. However, I will not take it as a personal affront if you don't execute every single thing, every single way that I tell you to do it, because that is not the plan. The plan is for you to say, I heard one thing that I can totally do, and that is going to change so many other things. That's the underpinning for so many other things that is going to just make my gardening, my fruit tree growing, my food growing life so much better. That's a win for all of us. That's my goal. And then you can email me and say, hey, I know you were talking about something else, but I was busy working on this. Would you please help me with a plan for that? And I am here for it. That is my entire job. My job is to make your life better. All right. So let's talk about the fact that we've been here before, right? We've done all of these things before. We've got time-tested solutions. Harkening back to what is sustainable, going back to the basics in some ways, right? Lots of the concepts are not new. We've lived this way for centuries, all right? And so if it's like when my uncle and me used to go and collect cow patties, cow manure, and we would bring them by the crocus sack load, which, it's like 50-pound bags of cow manure. And we would dig a trench around his mango trees and we would plant the manure down there. I only knew that the trees did so much better after that. It wasn't until I got into university that I found out all of the reasons why composted cow manure is one of the best fertilizers, right? It's the basis of a really, really good sustainable operation, especially when you want healthy trees, you want really robust yields. Composted manure is wonderful. He'd been doing it. He didn't know why it was working. He didn't know that it was a combination of this is enriching the soil because it's organic matter. He didn't realize that it was also the nutrients that were breaking down. None of those were reasons why he did it. He was doing it because this is a practice that had been passed down, and he passed it into me. And I didn't know the science behind it. I just knew that it worked. And so when I found out what the science behind it was, of course, I called him up that evening and I was like, bro, you're never going to believe this. This is amazing. Let me tell you what we've been doing. And he was like, really? That much? Just because of that? I mean, yeah, it works, but that's why? So we shouldn't poo-poo on some of the practices of the past. We know that they work, right? And also, there is no one right way. Adapting to your land is the key, okay? So something that works well, even for your next door neighbor, might not work the same way in the same way for you. So do you want to reduce the amount of overhead water that your vegetables or your fruit trees are getting? Yes. But your next door neighbor might have vegetables growing in a raised bed, very proximate to the spigot, and they can put in some soaker hoses and walk away and they're able to maintain that easily. What drip irrigation might look like for you might be putting down micro emitters. It might be you using a watering wand and walking through your small patch with the wand and making sure that you're focusing that wand on the soil. Whatever it looks like to you, the practice, the thought, the concept is the same, but adapt it to your particular conditions and your particular preferences. There isn't anything wrong with what you want. Your preferences are your preferences, and you should have what you want. All right. And then worry-based solutions are often a waste of time and money. If it is something that is always on your mind, it is always a major concern of yours, let's figure out how to address it, okay? The last time I taught this class, I used the example of blueberries because I happen to like them. What would I do without blueberries? I would have to find something else to eat by the cartonful. Um, and that's going to be hard, right? So for me to say, well, maybe there's going to be a blueberry shortage. What am I going to have as my very happy blue snack if that's all I'm getting from it? And then I have to figure out some other things. Is it just something that I can pop in my mouth? Is that what the lure is for me? So I have to figure out what the qualities of this thing is. And then I need to find out, are there other things that have those qualities? Because surely trying to stockpile 8,000 pounds of blueberries for just for me is not a sustainable option, right? That's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a waste of money. It's going to be a waste of my resources. So maybe what I need to think about is ways to increase the yield on my Barbados cherries because I can still pop those into my mouth. I need to maybe consider the ways that I can increase a couple of the other things that I have that are quick and easy, snacky, fruity things. Whatever the other options are, I need to build some resilience into this this plant, this need of mine, so that I can stop worrying about whether or not blueberries are going to run out. So worry-based solutions never really work out well for us because we drain our resources on those things. All right. Working with nature and not against it. I hear it all the time. I'm sure that you all have heard this complaint. There's no soil in Florida. It's all sand. Welcome to the Republic of Florida. We have sand here. But what we also have is soil. Our soil is sand-based, but we have soil. Soil is a medium for growth, and so we have soil. Don't things grow here? things that we don't even want growing here are growing here. So we have soil, all right? So let's work with our soil. Let's work with what we have. We're working with the sand, we're working with the salt air, we're working with the humidity. And there are some things that just will not grow well here. It's going to drain us of our resources, and we're going to always be fighting with Mother Nature, and she never loses, right? So let's work on how do we get to observe nature cycles? How do we not fight with them, but work with them? All right. Every ecosystem has built-in solutions. We just need to tap into them. For example, the best time to plant a tree in Florida is January. That is why our Arbor Day is the third Friday in January. Okay. And sometimes that's not the best bet for the tropical fruit that we want to grow. Then we need to move it a little further down onto more into the cusp of spring when we have that last opportunity for frost to really affect us. Even though you all are down in Broward, you all still have some of those days in February and January where the blue line dips, right? Especially if you're more onto the interior of Broward County, if you're more like going towards Okeechobee's direction, you're going to have even less buffering of your temperatures. So you need to be aware of that so that when you're planning on planting your fruit trees, that you're working with it. And the good thing about doing it that way is that your fruit tree now has an opportunity to fully establish its roots and get ready for the next time over the next couple of hot months throughout the season for when you end up having to be concerned about that dip in temperature. Do you already have a healthy plant? Is it going to require that you have to be out there praying and burning incense and all of the rest of those things in order for it to survive? And the chances are no, because that plant has been fully established, or it's on its way to being fully established already, and it has had an opportunity to send out some roots and to start doing what it's supposed to do to be resilient in the face of that kind of obstacle. All right. Overuse of chemicals and machines actually creates more work in the long run. And what I mean by that is not the use of chemicals or machines, the overuse. What are the ways that you can manage your pest issues without having to intervene with chemicals? And let's be clear and let's be honest, soapy water is a chemical, okay? Soapy water is not benign. It is actually a broad spectrum pesticide. This is when I know that most of the people who are in my classes are like, what? What are you trying to say to me right now? And what I'm saying to you is soapy water does not care what insect it goes on. It is going to harm that insect, right? So be very careful with your use. Use it judiciously, even if it is something as low impact, low residue as soapy water. All right. And in our sandy soil, sometimes machines really do create more work in the long run, because what you might end up doing if you go and till up something is you're tilling up a new round of weed seeds that you're trying to get rid of. You're cutting up something that might be able to spread by stolon and stem, and you don't want that. So sometimes your better bet is to assess your situation, try to come up with solutions that don't exacerbate the issue. And if you have questions about a patch in your yard and you don't really know if you're going to cause more harm or help, email me quickly. Send me a scenario, send me a picture of the thing that you're trying to manage, and I will try my best to work out a very, very low impact, especially on you and your resources, method of getting it done. All right. An observation. I advocate strongly for having notebooks, for keeping records. All right. You need to know if your Florida Hass avocado is making avocados for you every year or every other year. You need to know whether or not that is happening because you're there every other year on time in order to fertilize it, or is that just the way that that tree is producing for you? observation of whether or not your treatment of a particular issue, a pest, insects, disease, um, environmental condition, whether or not your addressing of that issue has improved the situation that you're trying to manage, right? Without proper record keeping, you're also not going to know what you used the last time to address something so that you don't use it again, so that that plant, that disease, that insect doesn't build up resistance to that particular chemical. All of these things are very, very helpful. And it also allows you to have more flexibility. I know it sounds like I'm giving you another task, but it actually helps increase your flexibility because when you know what has worked in the past, when you know that a particular plant was annoying you to begin with, you'll know then when somebody is generously offering you a cutting that you can say to them, you know what, that's really not for me. It didn't work well in my landscape because my landscape disagrees with it. And and you know that because you have a record of what really, really just was not for your landscape. You don't have to say, yeah, I can't remember if I've tried that or not. You will remember that you've tried it before and it was not the best fit for your location. All right. So here are some of the things that I would like to discuss with you all um, to make your self-reliance even better, right? To make it easier on you to manage your landscape and to have your closed system. Composting, water conservation, and wildcrafting for self-reliance. Composting, it turns your landscape and kitchen waste into free fertilizer. Water-wise homesteading, you're making every single drop count. Wildcrafting, okay, this slide isn't showing up properly, but it's basically doing the things that you can do for yourself and also being able to share them with other people in your group. So for you all at the Rare Fruit Council, it might just be somebody who is really great at making or processing mangoes for puree, and everybody else is like, yay, somebody else took the shot. But then there's another person who makes amazing mulberry jam, so wildcrafting. And then it's also like using these plants for medicines. I have a volunteer who makes amazing elderberry syrup. All right, so let's talk about composting and let's break it down really, really quickly and make it super simple. Why should you compost? It's nature's recycling system for healthier soil with you having to go and bring in inputs, right? Compost reduces the waste and it improves the soil naturally, right? So this is working with your sandy soil. This is you saying to your sandy soil, I love you, I adore you. Here are some really great friends. You don't have to be a great friend to have great friends because sand is not a great friend. Sand does not care. Sand is like, whatever, man. But your compost is going to be like, it's okay. I know that you're not friendly, but I am here to dwell with you and to be your best landscaping companion. All right. Healthy soil will hold more water. That's going to mean you're going to need less irrigation, which is great, because you don't want to have to always be out there watering, always out there. You don't want to be a slave to whatever it is that you're growing. You want to have a very symbiotic relationship with whatever it is that you're growing. You want to be able to sit down and say, I'm so glad that I'm growing this because it's giving me exactly what I want, and I don't have to go through a lot of garbage to get it. All right. And store-bought fertilizers can't replicate the complex nutrients in compost. Here's the caveat to composting and to using compost. Even though you might say to yourself, um, compost has nutrients and everything in it that I would like to feed to my plants, sometimes that does not happen because your soil microbiome doesn't have the little critters in it that will eat up that compost and help to make it even more digestible for your plant roots. That's not a reason to not compost because the other great benefit of composting is that it's still going to put organic matter into the soil and allow you to hold water at the plant's roots. So even if that's the only benefit, even if it's not going to be, even if it's not going to benefit by improved nutrient uptake or improved nutrient resource for the plant, that's not a reason for you not to use compost. Okay. And besides, there are so many other environmental benefits to composting. All right, so here are a couple of myths, right? The first myth is composting is complicated and smelly. The fact is, if you are using composting, if you're composting correctly, it's going to be odor-free and very, very easy. All right. So here's the way to make it happen. Bad smells come from too much moisture or too many things that are not nitrogen rich. So we're talking about maybe you threw too much grass clippings in there. And those are things that are easy to fix. So if it's too much moisture, you're going to throw some dry things in there. You can throw some shredded paper in there. And these days, you don't have to worry about your newspaper ink or your magazine paper. They usually use like a biodegradable wax. It's like a carnauba wax, which is it's a very natural wax. And they also use soy ink. So you can throw them into your compost bin. You can also use dry mulch. You can also use dry twigs or other things like that to open it up and soak up some of that moisture, okay? So that's easy to fix. Simple small scale systems work just as well as big fancy ones. Um, I have a three-step system in my yard. I have a 24-year-old 6-foot wall who goes out and turns my compost for me, and I am so grateful for my son. Um, we have a little system in our house. We keep a little container on the counter, and before the sun sets in the evening, someone, whoever is in the kitchen around that time, will go out and throw it out with all of our kitchen scraps for the day. I like to make it easy on myself. I do not put my compost area too far away where it is an evening trek because we won't do it. I know it, they know it. We keep it near enough so that it's not too far out, but it's far enough. All right. Um, and it's just the optimum size is 3 by 3, but we actually have it in a 2 by 1 little system. And because we have it near enough to the house that it's easy to manage, that has also been working for us. Some of the fancy systems, like the $200 and $300 bins that'll make it tumble out into the smaller things. If you can afford that, and that is going to be the best way for you to manage your compost, I encourage you to go for it. If you want a very super simple, small scale system, email me and I will send you the details. I will send you the instructions. I'll even send you the link to my composting class. I recorded a video for it a few months ago. And of course, nature compost on its own, we just speed up that process. And sometimes composting looks like you digging a tiny hole that's like a rectangular loaf pan, and you put all of your kitchen scraps for the week into that hole and you cover it up and you leave it there. You dig another hole for the next week. There are so many ways to compost. That's called trench composting. But I try to discourage people from making major trenches. You know what I mean? Because that's a lot of work. A small loaf pan is like 2 dips of the shovel and then you're done. And you know where this little trench is because you can still see the little mound from it. And then months later, you can go back and you can harvest your compost and move it to where you want to move it to, or you can plant something in that space that you've just finished enriching. Either way you want to go, all right? But composting, if you choose to do it, does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be a big whoop. And it's very, very helpful in our sandy soil. This is a part of us working with Florida and not against her. All right. Um, I did mention soil microbes. I forgot that I had this, this slide. So they're secret allies that break down waste into nutrients. There are bacteria and fungi that decompose the organic matter and they unlock the nutrients for you. Healthy microbes also suppress plant diseases naturally because they're in there munching those things down, breaking them down into their smallest parts. And what we use to fertilize our trees and what our trees eat is the microbe poop because it's digested into and it's broken down into its very small chemical components. All right. Composting feeds the underground ecosystem that supports your plants. So, if you are working on your soil food web, if you're working on your soil microbiome and you want some more information, or if you don't know what that is and you want a class on that, tell Kareem and I will come back and I will teach that to you all in another day. Um, and let's talk about the roles of worms and fungi. Having fungi, having worms, those are great things. They're nature's cleanup crew. I just had to assess a school playground where one of the checklist items was whether or not there's mold on the mulch. And of course, there are good molds and there are bad molds, right? There are good fungi and there are bad fungi when it comes to human respiratory health. So I thought that was an interesting checklist item. So worms speed up composting and improve soil aeration. And of course, there is always the little vermicomposting bins. They're usually set up in a three-step system that you use. Most people use red wigglers, like in the picture, and they will sit down in all of that kitchen debris and other things, and they will just eat away. A lot of people use their paper towels in that system to act as the moisture wicking component, and the worms love it. Um, this is where I will discourage the abundant use of citrus peels. The worms are not very fond of the oils. Okay. Um, Adding mycorrhizal fungi can also boost your plant growth if we're talking about fungi in general. And there are different types depending on the plants that you're growing. I just did a site visit for a man who is growing avocados and mangoes and I think star fruit. So I went and I gave him a breakdown of that. I can send that to you all if you would like. Just add that to the list of things that I can follow up with you all on, and I will send it to you. And I will also send you a way to keep on encouraging those colonies and stretching them out as far as you can get them. All right. What should you compost? What are the browns? What are the greens? What are the ratios? Okay. So the greens are your food scraps. They're your clippings, and they provide nitrogen into the bin. The browns are the dried leaves, cardboard, straw. They provide carbon, which is another thing that you want, right? And a balanced mix of that is going to prevent the odors and it's also going to speed up decomposition. And what you're trying to do is have a good balance of those. And I will tell you that in this crate here, that is the lasagna method where you have spread out some browns, then you put some greens on top, then you put some browns, then you put some greens on top. That's the method that we're using at my house. Okay. And I have it in a very small rectangle setup. Here's what we've been doing. We put the browns down first because I wanted to have some twigs and some sticks on the bottom so that there's air coming up from the bottom. Okay. So it's not only wicking, it's also able to provide some air pockets. When we cover that up with our food scraps, when we have one very simple layer on top, then we put another layer of mulch. We don't go and put the mulch on top until the whole layer of green is on there. And then when we do put the mulch on top, we do about 2 to 3 inches. And what we've gotten into is like looking at it and saying, if I had to have a sandwich, would this be a good sandwich? That's it. All right. You're going to know whether or not you have enough brown on top and on bottom by whether or not there's any weeping, if there's any extra water. And if there is, you turn it, you give it some air, and you put a little bit more brown in there to start to dry that up. It's it's easy to do. Do not defeat yourself by saying, "Oh my God, that sounds like so much work." It is not. if this is what you intend to do. All right. You just put some green things on there. And some people actually stir it up when they put their greens in every day. And I love that for them. I'm not always home when someone's putting the greens down. So that's the system that we've decided to go into. Just doing our layers, and my son goes in every 2 weeks or so in the wintertime and turns it. He turns it once a week in the summertime because it is hot and the humidity that makes the soil microbes and everybody get to work even faster. Okay, so what should you not compost? Here are the things that usually cause the problems. Meat of any variety, okay, should not go into your compost heap. Um, this is where I explain that even textured vegetable protein should not go into your compost. Most of your vegetarian meat substitutes have compounds in them that makes them so that they're not just plain black beans, they're not just plain kale, they're not just plain brown rice, right? There are binders, there are fillers into those kinds of products that are not going to be appreciated by your microbes in your compost heap. So any kind of meat should just go straight to the landfill trash, or if you've got pigs, okay? Um, Dairy products, except for eggshells. Eggshells good, eggs themselves, no. You should not be putting sour cream. You should not be throwing milk on your compost heap. All of those things. And then oily foods. Your microbes, your worms and stuff, your fungi and stuff are not going to appreciate the oily foods, right? And you also don't want to invite pests. So rats are going to think you're feeding them French fries. The raccoons are going to think that you're feeding them French fries. Um, they're going to show up instead of the other things that you want to show up. Um, some glossy paper still does have chemicals, but not as many anymore. So most of your magazines are going to be fine. When I say glossy paper in this sense, I'm talking about maybe like flyers. Some of those are not using wax, they're actually using plastic. And treated wood contains chemicals that are specifically designed to discourage insect activities, to discourage arthropod activities. So you don't want them into your compost pile. So that means if you're doing a woodworking project with treated wood, your sawdust should not go into your compost pile. All right. And then, of course, too much citrus. The same thing. If you're vermicomposting or regular composting, try to spread out the amount of citrus over a period of time. Um, Drying your orange peels, drying your grapefruit peels, and then slowly putting them in there is easier and better. Or just burying them in the soil on their own is also another really good option. Um, Simple composting systems, as I alluded to from before, um, the pile method, you're just stacking the materials and let nature do the work. This works really well if you have a lot of space that you can do this in. You just let that pile burn, and eventually you go back to it and you've got rich soil that you can use. A bin system works for faster decomposition, and it's a lot easier to manage. This is a plastic bin that has openings and compartments and stuff. I've rescued um what are those things called? The little crates, the little pallets. And we just have three of them in a row, standing up. That's perfect as well. As long as you know which one you're currently throwing your landscape and kitchen debris into, and then which one is cooking down and which one is finished, right? At least three steps. They don't have to be big steps. They don't have to be wide steps. They have to be the steps that you can manage that are sustainable for you. And of course, there's trench composting, like I spoke about before. Bury the food scraps directly in the garden. Like if you've identified the space for your next mango tree, you can start to fill that up with your food scraps. That mango tree is going to love, 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 love you. Now, to be clear, compost is not going to just sit there all of the time forever and ever, amen, because you put it there. That sand is going to be like, reclaiming my space. Thank you very much. It was nice, I guess, to see you. Okay, fine. Um, and then that area will eventually look like you didn't do any kind of management. Composting and the use of compost throughout your landscape is a cyclical thing. You're going to always keep on adding and keep on building. Soil management is a continuous process. All right. Um, how do you speed up decomp? Turn. Um, you also want to make sure that there's the right level of moisture. So, and make sure that your particle sizes are already going towards that direction. I experimented with blending my food scraps. We ran through our compost heap in 2.5 weeks in the winter when I blended my food scraps. You don't have to. I just wanted to know how it would work here in Florida because where I did my undergrad, I tried it in Alabama and it was about a month, so it wasn't that much of a difference. I'm aware that the temperatures at that time were, the difference in the area was the factor. Turn the pile weekly for faster breakdown because if you're constantly turning that pile inward and getting those new things in to cook, getting them into the hot center, you're going to be well. Keep it damp but not soggy. Make sure that your microbes have nice moist areas to be able to travel into. They're not afraid of being desiccated. So what you're trying to get is if you picked up your compost, you could squeeze it and it would just leave a sheen of moisture on your hand, but it's not going to just drip through. Okay. That's what you're trying to work towards. Um, Harvesting and using the finished compost, you'll know that there are some you'll know it's ready when it smells earthy and it crumbles easily. Like if you just pick it up and it just wants to fall through your hands. Um, you can sift out the unfinished bits if you want to, if that's going to float your boat, but you don't have to. And you can use you can use compost as mulch. You can use it as a soil amendment, or you can or you can use it for compost tea, which works wonders on fruit trees. All right. Keep it low maintenance, keep it consistent. Small, regular additions work better than dumping huge amounts into one pile. Um, you want to keep it shady, make it accessible. And your compost pile is never done. It's always cycling through. That's a lot of fun, especially for if you like to have something to do. Your compost pile is the location. All right, let's move on to water-wise homesteading. Why water conservation matters. Well, it matters if you're trying to be self-reliant, right? Where are you getting your water from? We don't have unlimited water. Droughts really do happen, and droughts hit our fruiting trees so hard because they can't give us what we want from them if they're trying to navigate drought, okay? Overwatering leads to shallow roots and weaker plants. So it's not a sin to love your plant. It is not healthy for them though. And then you're not getting what you want, which is a good, robust, vigorous plant that is going to produce the fruit that you want. And capturing your rainwater lowers costs and increases resilience. And let me be clear about capturing rainwater. You don't have to set up a rain barrel system. That's not the only thing that that means. It also means just making a landscape that absorbs that water. That's also capturing rainwater. All right. So one of the myths is more water, better growth. The truth is sometimes more water means sicklier growth, right? Overwatering will leach the nutrients and weaken the roots of your plants. And some of your plants are going to be like, this is too much water. I'm trying to drink all of this up. And you'll see the yellowing, you'll see the disease starting, the rot starting, excuse me, and you don't want that. Less frequent deep watering actually encourages strong roots after you've established your plant. And some plants actually thrive in drier conditions with the right soil. Um, my star fruit trees, they don't care. Like they sit down in my landscape, and whether or not I do anything for them or with them, they're just like, hey, girl, and they're living their best lives. My cherry bushes, although they are very drought tolerant, they're very resilient, they will start to show some signs of, hey, you might want to come and see about me soon. And I'm like, oh yeah, great. I put down the soakers, and because my cherry bushes and my starfruit are proximate to one another, everybody gets a good long drink that day, and then they're back to, oh, great, we're living our best lives again. All right. Here are some basics on rainwater harvesting. You can use rain barrels, you can use cisterns, you can use swales. A 55-gallon rain barrel can provide weeks of rainwater for people who are not super users of water. Swales will slow the runoff and they'll recharge your groundwater system. Now, when I say swales, I'm not telling you to go in and dig major furrows into your landscape. That's not what I'm saying. But if there are parts of your landscape that are downward sloping where the water runs off rapidly, sometimes even the most shallow divots give that water just enough resistance to be as lazy as it wants to be, and it goes downward. Okay. And of course, investing in a cistern system can store water for long-term drought protection, which is helpful. Um, Setting up a drip irrigation system is also very good. Drip irrigation reduces evaporation and targets the plant's roots. So I've only seen bromeliads such as pineapples and turfgrass have a preference for overhead watering. Nearly everything else that you are growing prefers to be watered at the soil level, at the root system, not their stems, not their leaves. Your houseplants are a different issue, and we're not talking about those today. So DIY systems can be built from basic tubing, automated timers with rain gauges can also prevent overwatering. You you can check with me about what your plants require water requirement needs are, and I can help you navigate that easier. But definitely building some resistance into your plants, making sure that they can go through a few days without you having to give them water. Their roots are going down, they're going sideways, they're really, really healthy and robust, and they're seeking their own resources is going to help you. Um, Mulch, one of my favorite things. All right. It's nature's way of conserving water and building soil. All right. Reduces evaporation. It keeps moisture in the soil longer. It prevents weeds from really, really overtaking. It's not gonna, it's not gonna stop weeds. It's just gonna prevent them from becoming more of a problem than you want them to be. And it also reduces that competition for water because weeds, they're very efficient. They want to live. All right. Organic mulch decomposes over time and adds enrichment to the soil, right? So that's going to add organic matter to your soil and help with that ability to absorb water and hold it at the roots where you want it. Um, Choosing your drought tolerant and native plants, and you can also thrive with a little less water if you're putting out there. Native plants are helpful. Drought tolerant plants use less water and they require less maintenance. Perennials are also great. So a lot of the fruiting plants that we love are perennials. And if you can make sure that they establish some deep roots, then they're going to be more resilient. Gray water reuse. I use gray water a lot. All right. It's legal and safe to repurpose household water. Gray water from sinks, tubs, and washing machines can be used to irrigate your plants. Use some eco-friendly soaps to avoid harming your soil life. So if you're working on your soil microbiome and you don't want to kill the microbes that are in your soil, try to use more eco-friendly soaps, things that will not go into the soil and be like attacking your microbes that you want to keep there. Simple systems to redirect the water to trees in your gardens work. I have a very simple PVC pipe system that sends my gray water out to my banana suckers. And my banana suckers adore me. I can't wait to get, oh, that was the other thing I need to add to my list. I need to get some more sugar cane. So that's a really great way of having access to water that would otherwise be lost. Um, all right. So using rain barrels, using drip irrigation, adding mulch into your landscape will help your landscape manage water more efficiently. Put the right plants in the right place. I just answered a query about a plant that was taken out of the shade and why it's always so thirsty now. And part of that is there's more evaporation, and that plant is trying to realign itself in the landscape. Um, Less reliance on external water sources means that you're going to be more resilient. Um, and let's quickly discuss a little bit of living off the land, wildcrafting with native plants, and of course, wildcrafting with some of the other fruiting and medicinal plants that you're going to be growing. It's ethical and sustainable harvesting from nature. If you harvest only what you need and leave enough for wildlife and for regrowth, you're going to have less arguments with your landscape and your environment, okay? Learn to identify edible, medicinal, and useful plants. This is where there's a caveat. So when I get to that slide, I will talk with you all about that. And understanding the seasonal cycles for the best harvest. Although my elderberry loves to flower and make berries and everything, and the squirrels think that I'm their best neighbor, I don't argue with the squirrels because I have a volunteer who makes me elderberry syrup, and I never tried to just munch on them by themselves. Like, that's not my ministry. I'm aware that the elderberry harvest, the elderberry season also coincides with a couple of other things in my landscape that I do prefer to eat. So I let them be sacrificed to the squirrels. All right. So wild edibles, there are a lot of local native plants that are safe and nutritious to eat. Beautyberry has edible berries and the leaves are used for mosquito repellent. It's kind of a reasonable repellent. Smilax, I try not to keep thorny things simply because sometimes I have to use thinners. So please be aware that Smilax has some wicked thorns. But the young shoots are edible like asparagus. And then there's always dollarweed. A lot of people eat them like a microgreen. And if you have chickens or ducks or anything like that, dollarweed is adorable. Now, am I telling you to go eat the dollarweed out of your front yard, out of your front lawn? No. I'm telling you to grow this deliberately, to grow this mindfully. You never know what's happening in your front yard when you're not at home, or even when you are at home, right? So please be careful of the inputs that are around your dollar weed before you go and pluck it up to eat it. Some medicinal plants are Yapon holly. That is a native plant with a lot of caffeine in it. There's always Spanish needle. Um, it's used for teas and it has immune boosting properties. There's elderberry, it supports immune health. Um, and let me tell you all something. Do not sacrifice yourself on the altar of homesteading. If you don't want to make your own elderberry syrup, but you've saved $15 to go buy it in a bottle from the grocery store, do that. These are all just little tips and ideas for doing things more sustainably in some directions so that you can do other things in other directions and live your best life. Okay, that's the idea. All right, be careful. The myth is if it's natural, it's safe. That's not true because sometimes the plant identified is the identification is incorrect. Okay, some plants look similar to the one that you can have. And that one is actually toxic. And I'm using this picture of mushrooms deliberately because I saw someone advertising reishi mushrooms, wild harvested in Florida. Yeah. It looked more like a Ganoderma conch, which they're in the same fungi family. And so I contacted the person advertising them on Facebook and I asked them where were they sourcing them, and they told me from palm trees. That's not safe, that's not healthy. And encourage them to take down their post and to learn more about that family of mushrooms before something detrimental occurred. Always cross-check your ID with multiple sources before you consume it. There's always one adventurous friend who tries all sorts of things. Love on that friend. Offer them banana bread and find out what they know about what almost killed them and what didn't. Okay, learn from their experience is your wisdom. All right, avoid foraging in polluted areas, so not roadsides, not chemically treated lands. This is especially important for the people who are like up north and they're stopping on the side of the road to collect dandelion greens. All right. So while crafting for utility and for craft, what is beyond the food and medicine of wild crafting? Palmetto fronds were used for weaving and shelter building, and pine resin is used as a fire starter and waterproofing and wound dressing. It's actually pretty good as a wound dressing. Ask me how I know. Cattails are used for food, fiber, and insulation material. Have you ever seen when a cattail just explodes? Then it makes sense that it could be used for insulation material, right? Um, Protect your natural resources, harvest wisely to keep the ecosystem thriving. Follow the one-third rule. I try to teach the one-third rule in almost everything. Take no more than a third of what is available. All right. Spread out your harvesting to prevent overuse in one particular area. And this is even true with your mango trees, right? You don't just harvest on that one side. You definitely try to go all the way around, find the ones that are half ripe or and try to save them from the squirrels or what or the birds, right? So that's the same thing. Try to spread out your harvest in all of the ways. Consider replanting and spreading seeds to give back to nature. And some of your plants will allow you to do that. So if you're growing flowering plants underneath your fruit trees to increase pollination, right? So if you're growing red salvia, if you're growing native porterweed, if you're growing gaillardia, then when you're over there to check on your fruit trees, if you're deadheading, you just sprinkle those seeds down. The bees are going to be grateful for it. The soil is going to be glad because then you can go back when those seedlings are coming up and pick up your spent ones. Um, Build a relationship with the land, learn to read the landscape, observe the natural patterns. What is growing where? Why is it growing over there very well? Sometimes you have a wet area in your landscape and you didn't realize it until you see a whole bunch of dollarweed coming up. Now you know that that is a wet area, right? Understand your microclimates on your property for better planning. Sometimes you have a plant that prefers a little bit of shade, but it also wants wind. So how do you give it the shade that it requires without it being blocked from the wind, right? And collect with local foragers and people with indigenous knowledge for a better idea of how and what to use. Um, So for practical and sustainable homesteading, you have to keep in mind that you're working with nature. You're working with the heat, you're working with the humidity, you're working with the soil, you're working with the boom and the bust of our rain and not against it. Make one sustainable change at a time, and that's going to make a big difference in the overall scheme. Keep learning. Nature is your best teacher. Observe, experiment, adapt, take down, keep your notes. Um, Building self-sufficiency is definitely about working smarter and not about working harder. Thank you all very much. Um, if you all need to get in contact with me, I give Kareem permission to share my email address with you all. I would love to help you all create more sustainable fruit growing systems, even if it is for your 2.5 acre tract that you all are working on, or for your personal home residential use. I would love to be able to help you all to have healthier plants, better harvests, and a more enjoyable time working in your landscape. Thank you all for having me.
We have some questions,
Oh, really?
Nikki. Yes, there are questions. Okay, if it's okay, I want to do ladies first. Karim, uh,
Sure.
Tamra has a question.
What?
Oh.
Hi there. I don't know if my lighting's okay. Hi, Nikki. Thanks very much. That was very informative. I wanted to ask you, I have one of those hot frog composters that's got the two drums that you turn manually, and I don't have a lot of sun in my yard. I have mostly shade, especially in the backyard where it's located. So, does it need to get at least partial sun in order to compost properly?
No, you have it in the right place.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, good. Okay.
Yes.
And then is there also is there an easy formula for the greens to browns, and in which category are coffee grounds? Are they brown?
Coffee grounds are actually in the greens.
Oh,
Mm,
okay.
isn't that
Um,
cool?
yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. The best ratio, okay, so for you to be throwing this into your little turn
Hmm.
composter, and what it does is it'll funnel it out on its own into the other chamber, right? Is
No,
that
they're
what?
independent chambers. You can
Oh,
do
okay. So
one and
you
it'll be
start
cooking.
phase
Yeah.
one
And then
here and then
right.
phase two. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. All right. So here's what I recommend. Every time you go out there with some kitchen scraps,
Hmm.
throw in an equal or slightly equal handful of something dry because your kitchen scraps are considered wet.
Okay.
All right. So if you've got your banana peel, your eggshells, and your coffee grounds,
Okay.
whatever that is in your little container,
Well,
just grab yourself a handful of something dry, be it shredded paper, be it a little bit of mulch that you have in a pile somewhere, or
dried
whatever, and
leaves, anything like that.
paper towels from in your kitchen,
Okay.
right? When I started to encourage my youngest son and our housemate, who is my cousin Ruthie, um, I would look at them and say, put the paper towels to one side, allow them to dry so that we can use them as the dry thing that they are.
Oh,
And
okay.
they're like, so you're telling us that we're throwing the paper towel outside onto the compost heap. And the first time that the three of us were cooperating to do this, and I showed them, there was no distinguishing features. You know your compost is ready when you can't tell what used to be a banana skin,
Gotcha.
when you can't tell what used to be paper towel, what used to be strawberry tops. That is when you have compost. When all of it is just a beautiful brown color and you don't know what is what, that is when your compost is ready.
Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good.
You had some questions?
Oh, and I have another tip on how to use your compost for your fruit trees.
Mhm.
The best way to use your compost for your fruit trees, if you're trying to make to use it as a feed, right,
Mhm.
is wherever the drip line of your fruit tree is, that's where you want to spread your compost. You don't want to spread it up against the tree because that's not where your roots that are doing that food processing is. It's your roots that are out near the drip line of the tree that is doing that searching and that seeking for resources. So that's where you would put your compost. You want to just sprinkle it out around the drip line of your tree. And the drip line is if you're looking at your tree and your tree looks like a big old lollipop, the canopy, the edge of that canopy, the halo of that canopy, that is your drip line. Okay, the next question is, what is the best way to manage nematodes in your garden soil? It depends on what you're growing. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is some of the rules for that is definitely increasing your organic matter. They don't like the acidity that the organic matter will bring to the garden soil. Another thing to do is not feed the nematodes, right? Okra and tomato. Mercy, do nematodes love that? Okay, so you're going to be treating that space with increasing the organic matter. You want to put down some marigolds. You want to do some other things to help reduce the nematode populations over there. Um, but you also don't want to feed them. So you don't want to do any more vegetable gardening in that spot. You don't want to put down any more okras because they're in the mallows family. You don't want to put down any more tomatoes. You don't want to grow bell peppers. You don't want to grow eggplants or anything in that family that includes regular Irish potatoes. They're all in the same family. And you also want to send me an email so that I can explain crop rotation to you. But for right now, that area that sounds like it's infested with nematodes, let's fallow that for at least a year or a half of a year. There's also soil solarization. I don't know how much space you're growing them in for me to encourage you to do that on a large or a small scale, but I can talk with you more about how you're going to manage depending on the specifics, like how big is this space? Is it in a raised bed? Is it in full sun? Those kinds of questions, when I can get some answers from you for them, I'll tell you, like now you're coming up on the opportunity that if it's a raised bed, I would feed the soil microbes, plastic it down, let that soil burn out for the whole entire summer. Then I would start a rotation of cover crops in there. I would put some marigolds in there so that whatever the heat didn't kill during the summer, because the heat is only good for so far down, right? Then let's put some things in there that the nematodes are definitely not gonna love. They're not gonna love the marigolds. They're not gonna love, there are some types of hemp that would also, are they going to grow well down in South Florida? Not necessarily, but that's not the issue. You're not trying to grow anything to eat in that spot. What you're trying to do is irritate the nematodes enough to get them to go away and to reduce the nematode populations so that afterwards, when you're doing your crop rotation, they don't get fully reestablished and humbug you again. Does that make sense?
So the application that I have, Nikki, is that it's this one section of my yard. There's 3 fruit trees. They're only about 2 feet tall and they're just not growing. Yet I have about 50 fruit trees and everything else is just fine. So it's very sandy area. It is in full sun. It is getting irrigated. I'm fertilizing, mulching slightly, but for some reason they're just not growing. So I'm assuming it's nematodes. I can't imagine what else it could possibly be.
Okay, Cassia, you're right. You can plant nematode resistant crops, but the resistance doesn't mean that they won't succumb. And that's only if the population of nematodes is not overwhelming. And some seeds are resistant to nematodes, but I would recommend that you already put in a robust, healthy plant if you already know that you have nematodes. You don't want to plant by seed if you have an infestation of nematodes. That's fine for after they're done working on that to reduce the nematode population. I would not recommend that they do any of that right now if they have a significant problem. If you can see nematodes in your tomato plant roots, you've got a significant problem that you need to work on. Okay, now back to you, Kareem. What type of fruit trees are they?
One is an avocado, a jackfruit, and a white sapote. They're about 2
Okay,
feet tall. And they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
right. That is definitely a mulch problem. You need to definitely mulch their whole entire, and in your imagination, you're going to look at whatever their canopy is and go 2 more times that, mulch that area. They want the comfort of a nice, moderate temperature to be able to spread out their roots and get properly established. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you were to be overwatering them, they will react negatively to that as well. So make sure that if they're already, how long ago did you plant them?
Probably like 2 years ago.
Oh dear, yes. They don't want you to be irrigating them 2 and 3 times for the week. They don't mind having a deep watering every now and then to make sure that their roots are stretched and they're stressed out. It sounds like they're not stressed out and they're acting like teenagers who don't want to leave home, right? You need to encourage them to mature, to be more self-sustaining. Would dilute hydrogen peroxide help the soil regarding the nematode question? I've not tried that myself. Um, so I will not be able to really speak on that. I can go and ask a researcher that I know about using a dilution of hydrogen peroxide. Um, I would still be very uncomfortable recommending it because one of the things that would be is a broad spectrum pesticide, and there are things in the soil that if you encourage them, they will come to your aid in remedying your nematode issue. So I wouldn't just let something with no direct target into my soil.
Thank you.
All right. So yes, that's what I would say to you, Kareem. Um, your avocado tree is it's gonna be reasonably fine. The other ones, if and what are you feeding them with?
Probably just some, because they're small, like 8-3-12 with micronutrients. Very light
Mm-hmm.
application,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all mulched very lightly away from the
Mm-hmm.
trunk.
Okay, so I would encourage you to change your irrigation, redo your mulch practice, give them a
Mhm,
good covering because I think that their roots are gun shy in your sand,
mhm.
right? So change your mulching application, let their roots get a little bit more comfortable, and very early in a day or overnight, give them a foliar fertilizer treatment and drench from the top all the way down onto your new bed of mulch. Give
And
them a good drench and let's see how they react. But only after you've reduced your watering and we can get a couple of more really good roots to come out so that your plants are not confused. Um, am I against using landscaping fabric? I learned cardboard is best. I have started quite the cardboard festival. Um, and a lot of the people who are doing cardboard come and tell me that they learned it from a person who I taught it to, which is hilarious, right? They're like, yeah, so she's doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I know she's doing it. Am I against using landscaping fabric? No, I'm not against anything that works for you. Here is the reason why I don't use it, and I try to get people to think about using it differently. Um, landscaping fabric creates a barrier, yes. But what it also does is any seeds that are dropped on top of it stay on top. And now they have an opportunity to colonize on top. So it turns into a default seed bank. All right. So if birds are flying over and they drop some pepper seeds on top, they're not protected underneath that fabric, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is a lot of plants, their first leaves are so tiny that they come up through the weave of the landscape fabric. And what you've got now is this landscape fabric acting as mulch, as insulation. And you're fighting with the fabric to get up this weed that has established amazing root systems underneath it. So landscaping fabric really does make some of our landscaping efforts a lot more difficult than it has to. If you are trying to um, do soil building practices, though, cardboard is always going to be your best bet. And depending on how much time, how much effort you have, if you put down 2 to 3 layers of cardboard in a particular space and you drop a good load of mulch on top of it, and if you're able to walk away from it, then what you're going to come back to is going to be so much easier to manage and so much better enriched, right? Now, if you don't have that opportunity and you only put down 1 layer or 2 layers, and then you put down mulch and you punch holes into it, and there's a possibility that you're still going to be going out there and pulling up the couple of strays of weeds that are going to come up, like I'm doing in my yard, then that's also fine. It's going to give you a head start on managing that space the way that you want to manage it. I call cardboard the great equalizer. That's what I call it, right? I look at it and I'm like, I'm in a big battle with 5,000 weeds in this spot. Am I going to want to go in there and pull them all out? Am I going to want to battle with them? Or am I going to just lay down a really good couple of sheets of cardboard, drop some mulch on it, and then come and kill the children when I get the chance, you know? That's what I would do.
Steve has a cardboard related question. Steve, do you want to ask about
When you're
putting
using cardboard in your compost bins, how small should you cut the pieces up to be?
I can tell you that um, I cut up cardboard on my anger management days when I can't get outside and pull weeds. Yeah. Um, and I generally just tear down in strips, maybe this about 4 inches thick, 4 inches wide. No matter how long the strips are, it doesn't matter. It's the width of it that is really, really hard. So as long as they can get in there and get a lot of area to munch on, they don't care.
Okay.
Right? So I try to do it about 4 inches wide has been the sweet spot for me. It's not too much work, and it's also not too big for my little buggers. I would not use a paper shredder to shred cardboard. I would use a paper shredder to shred my junk mail. And you can totally do that. I have about 2 or 3 year lychee trees that I believe have LEM. Should I remove or attempt to treat? I would attempt to treat. If you have an LEM infestation, I definitely encourage you. Richard, I think that it might work fine for you if you're shredding small pieces of cardboard, but then you still have to tear the cardboard and drop it into the shredder. And if that's how you want to use your shredder, you can do that. I have a 2 to 3. Okay, should you attempt? It depends on how much you love lychee, honestly. How big is the tree? Is it going to be feasible for you to get in there and do the treatment for your lychee tree? And if those answers are yes, then you could go ahead and treat. Now, how would you treat it? The major thing is any part showing more than 30% damage, you're going to go and cut them off. And you want to get that debris out of your landscape. That's not compostable debris. Let me be clear. That is not what you want to compost. You don't want to compost anything that is infested, because then that's going to take too much time out of your life to make sure that your compost gets up to the right temperature to do what it's supposed to do to remove that infestation, right? And then there are some sprays. Now, these I've not found not one thing labeled by OMRI as an organic spray that will help you with LEM. I have not found anything. I'm still digging, but then you're going to have to go and get yourself a bottle of death, and you're going to have to spray that tree down. And you're going to have to do repeat applications to continue to control, to establish control, and then to continue to control those ear, nose mites. You're not going to get a sustainable result with one application. I can tell you that LEMs really thrive in spaces where there is a lot of humidity. So making sure that your trees are separated enough, that they get enough airspace between them so that that can wick away some of that moisture is going to help you. Making sure that you're not overwatering them, that you're not over-fertilizing them, because LEM loves that new growth, that succulent new growth. So reduce your fertilization, reduce your watering for right now. Keep your trees on stasis until you can get some of that population significantly reduced and under management. And then don't ramp it up, but slowly let your trees slowly come back into fullness. It's those heavy flushes that really, really encourage LEM to just boom along with your plants.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Karim, did you have a couple of questions?
Sure. Real quick, on the back to the composting. I also have one of those tumbling or composters. There's two separate tubs to rotate, and I have the bad habit of feeding each one of them a little bit every time. So I'm kind of alternating, but I need to stop doing that because I need to have one tub that's going to fully cure so I can use the compost. If I keep adding, I'm going to have slices of carrots in my compost. So what's the time table after I put the last piece of green that I can actually harvest the compost material?
There are a lot of factors that go into that, right? So it would be, what is the temperature like? How often are you turning it? What is your moisture like? So I can't tell you that. I can tell you what finished compost looks like. It looks indistinguishable in its properties. But I
Right.
can give you a little tip on how to keep it to 1 tumbler, right? You're not the first, or you probably won't be the last person to ask me this. So let me tell you what I figured out with a friend of mine. We use their favorite color as a sticker, a little sticker sheet. It's just a laminated piece of paper that we put double-sided tape on. And we put that on the one that they're using. We emptied out the other side, we filled up one side, and we actually ended up with one full container, right? Some of it was half processed, some of it was still, but we just did that to give one side a clean slate, one side a processing side. And the
Right.
clean slate side, the side that you're now going to start to feed, gets whatever your favorite color sticker is. And that'll keep you mindful. It's not that you don't care. It's actually not even that you're just being lazy about it. That's not the issue. The issue is you're just going out there and you're just like, it's your turn to get a wee bit of my happiness, right? That's what it is.
And they all get a
And
little turn every day.
right. And then you get frustrated because you realize, oh my God, I'll never get this done and it's going to be a mess, right? So you're going to have to encourage your brain to say,
Right.
I'm still going to have this amazing compost that I will now be able to slow feed my plants with just by putting that color sticker on there. That
Okay.
helped my one friend. Now, if that doesn't help you, we'll figure out something else that's going to do it for you.
Right.
But the fact that you are recycling your food scraps and that you are recycling things that can be recycled and putting it right back into your landscape. I like to tell people, I paid for it all, I want to keep it all. That's how I look at it, right? I don't even throw away tree branches. I put them way off into the corner. And let me be fully transparent with you all. I don't have a big piece of land, but I also am not living on 1/4 of an acre where every single inch counts. I live on slightly less than 1/2 of an acre. So if I have a tree branch corner, that might seem unrealistic to someone who's living on a smaller piece of land than me. You don't have to have a tree branch corner. I happen to have one because I think that's the best use of that little bit of space. All right.
And I had one last question on my end. Citrus and mulching. I hear that we're not supposed to mulch citrus. What's your take on that?
All right. So the legend is you're not supposed to mulch citrus. You're not supposed to improperly mulch citrus if you're going to mulch it at all. The reason for that is that citrus trunks are very sensitive. Okay? So if you were to mulch citrus, you would start at the drip line and mulch beyond the drip line because you want to insulate those roots that are going outward, that are seeking food and needing that kind of support if you are going to mulch citrus. But let's go back to the overall idea of mulching at all. When I encourage you all to mulch your trees, to mulch your plants that you're growing, I'm also encouraging you to do it properly. You need that mulch to be at least half a foot to a foot away from the trunk of the plant. Okay? The reason for that is some of the microbes that are in your soil, some of the microbes that are helping to break down that mulch to enrich your soil and to do the things that need to be done, they don't know better. Lignin is lignin to them. And if they're eating the mulch or if they're eating your tree trunk, they're not going to understand the difference. So you need to give them their zone of operation and they won't come and invade your trunk. But for citrus especially, it is very, very persnickety when it comes to mulch. And it's not that it doesn't want the insulating properties. It's not that it doesn't want the add-on benefits of this mulch breaking down and holding water. It's truly that they were mulched incorrectly. And citrus tends to be very robust, very drought tolerant, and not necessarily requiring that amount of care directly underneath itself. It doesn't mind the support outward at all.
Perfect.
Another question from Tamara.
Done. I just saw somebody update on the chat. I have a tumbling compost bin and it has been slow. I will start vermicompost to increase compostings and get worm castings. Okay. You you might end up with some worms in your tumbling compost bin, and that's fine. That's great. That's grand. That's awesome. That's a beautiful thing. Vermicomposting is usually like a condominium, and it has layers going upward. And what happens is you have worms in a couple of the layers, right? And then the worms will eat through, some of them will fall down. Okay, yes, you have a vermicompost system in your house. Perfect. And then what you end up with are the castings, and and some of us even have the little spigot on the bottom where we get some of the compost tea from them, and it's really, really great. You can definitely do the vermicompost and the tumbling compost bin. And you know what? If you're eating a significant amount of citrus, if you divide your citrus peels among them, then it won't be too overwhelming either. All right. Whoever TPHOL is, asks a question, any types of woods to keep out of mulch, i.e. citrus, melaleuca, palm, etc.? No, there are no types of woods that you need to keep out of your mulch. You can mulch them all. One of the reasons that I'm saying that is not that some of these mulches don't have allelopathic properties, and that just means they don't play well with others. They like to beat up the small kids, right? If you're running a sustainable system, you should be able to recycle whatever it is that is vegetative in your landscape, unless it's super inundated and it's just going to be very, very time consuming. So when I say that, I mean, if you pulled up some weeds that already have seeds on them and you don't have time to really manage your compost, you shouldn't throw them into your compost. I have a 24-year-old who loves me and my barbecue chicken. So he turns our compost. So we throw everything in there, be it super seed infested weeds. We throw it in there and it's fine. And we throw just utility mulch into it to keep it dried out. And utility mulch is generally whatever the tree trimmers go and cut, they put it through the shredder. So we come up with some things that have palm. We don't have a lot of melaleuca here, but I know that you all have it down there. If I were to tell you anything to do with your mulch prior to using it, if it's fresh mulch and it's a mixed bag, if you're using utility mulch, the melaleuca in it is likely to be diluted at some point. So it's not gonna stunt your vegetable garden or your small fruiting plant growth. And that's where it would be most effective, where the properties that say, I don't want any friends, I don't want anything growing near me is going to work. If you're mulching underneath a very large, fully established, robust mango tree, and you're doing like that recommended 2 to 3 inch layer, and it has some melaleuca, it has some citrus, it has some palm in it, it won't matter because that melaleuca is going to be getting composted on that spot, and it's going to get broken down, and its smaller, finer properties by the time it hits the root system will be negligible.
Great questions. Wow. Nikki, will you be able to share your contact information?
I'm going to type it
for
in
us?
here right now.
Perfect. And while you're doing that, we might have some announcements to make. And you're getting good comments in the chat box. Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Perfect.
all.
I think Karim has a little bit of information shared. Nikki, thank you so much for the presentation. It was very interesting.
I'm glad to hear it.
I had some
You have-
compost questions, but I'll just email them to you.
Okay. Well, Nikki, we covered so much ground, and it was a very interactive
Nice.
evening. And it was really
Bless you.
good. We haven't had one of those in a while, where we kind of go back to the basics and excuse me, and talk about how to take care of our land, basically. And it was
Yes.
really good. So definitely we'll stay in touch. I'd love to have you back. Maybe we can talk about avocados or something else, or fungi.
For sure.
And
So somebody
Lots to
just
cover.
asked if there's any chance of a homesteading part 2. So
The
to be
sequel.
honest, yes, right? If you send me your specific questions, I will categorize them and I will give you all a part 2 with no problems.
sounds
Beautiful.
great.
Thank you.
Sounds great. John, did you have any closing remarks? John's still there.
Some people are saying, thank you, good
No,
presentation.
not really. I think you did a great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you,
everyone. And
everybody.
we hope to see y'all at the 208 either on a Wednesday or Saturday. And Nikki, if you're ever in the Broward area on a Wednesday or Saturday, please look us up and stop by. You're welcome to come and check us out.
Oh, well,
Anytime.
send me your nursery's address, because I heard you all talking at the beginning of the meeting that you all actually have plant sales, and I would love to come and support that because I need more plants. So
We
hear
all
you.
do.
We have
we had to
people
do some
come.
clearing. We had to do some clearing in my yard, but I wasn't able to supervise it, and so a few of my plants got cut down accidentally.
Oh.
Yeah, my
Happens,
next
right?
door neighbor is doing an improvement, and unfortunately, I gave them permission to stage some of it on my property. So we needed to
Oh.
clear part of the space, but I really didn't know that they were going to need that much space, and they cleared everything.
Oh, wow.
Oh, no.
Oops.
No good deed.
All
Well,
right,
thank
cool.
you,
Well,
everybody.
I'll send you a flyer.
Thank you, Nikki.
All right. Thank
Good
you. Good night.
Good night.
Everybody's welcome to come practice homesteading at the 208, right, John?
Yes. Let me know what your big problems are, and I will help you address them.
We need help.
Have a
Me
good night,
too.
everybody.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Thank you.
night.
Good night.